understood too that Mexico was important too, but I didn't fully understand it at the time. But when I was working on my book, I remember this Clemente Ruiz. He's like the main promoter down there. The festival I went to, with Ska Wars and Ska Core Invasion, and I wanted to do a chapter about that. And I told him about it. I said, "Hey, I'm doing this book. I want to expand upon the article I wrote and demonstrate the scene." He said, "That's awesome, but you got to go to Mexico. You got to see what's going on in Mexico and talk about that too." And I said, I would love to do that. So he helped connect me to some of these bands. He's the one that told me that there was this festival in Oaxaca that I ended up going to. Oaxaca, that festival wasn't one of the bigger ones, but it just happened to be the one that was playing in the timeline that I needed to go. But was interesting because it was very local in the sense that it was all the bands were from Mexico. A couple were from like Puerto Rico, Spain. They were all Spanish-speaking countries. The big festivals in Mexico now are really starting to draw like American bands, UK bands, just the big names of ska. Skatalites, you know. It's amazing how many people go to these festivals in Mexico City, but it's not as insular in terms of Mexico's scene. But the one I went to was very much the scene there, and so it was amazing to see it and get to talk to these bands. Also, it was very interesting to see how the culture of ska there is so different. The music's not that different. It's very familiar. If you listen to ska, like third wave ska, or whatever, it's very familiar sounding music, but the music is known for being political. Like it's almost to the point where it's a stereotype that ska bands are political in Mexico. In fact, one of the band's managers kind of made a comment to me about how he's been trying to talk them out of breaking the stereotype of being political, you know, because it's all the bands do it sort of thing, which is like totally opposite. Now, a lot of bands in the US that play ska are political, but that's just not the stereotype of them, of what people think of as ska in the US.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because it's kind of to your point earlier, there's the couple of big bands and then there's all these other bands. And in my book, I did defend Real Big Fish, and in that same chapter, I did talk about ska in the mainstream and sort of the progress of what songs and what bands kind of got popular. But that was pretty much the only chapter I devoted to mainstream ska. Like, pretty much the rest of my book is in different time periods. A lot of it's still in the 90s, but I talk about what was basically like this whole other scene happening at the time. And that was all these bands that were not on MTV, that were not on the radio. Maybe they had a little bit, but not really that much. But they were the ska scene, and that was the ska scene I was familiar with.